They were treated monstrously. The case of Morant and Hancock, the two men who were executed, is a disgrace. Certainly by today's standards, they were not given any of the human rights that international treaties require men facing the death penalty to be given. But even by the standards of 1902, they were treated improperly, unlawfully. So they found them guilty, sentenced them to death one evening, 6 a.m. the next morning, a dawn execution. No opportunity to contact their families. The Australian government outrageously was not informed. These were a couple of colonials whom the British establishment decided to sacrifice to cover up the fact that the take no prisoners policy was indeed in force and had been approved, or at least acquiesced in, by higher-ups. They were rightly put on trial, but they were wrongly tried. And the defences that could have been run, which would have led to a much lighter sentence, in fact it would have ensured that they did not face execution, were simply not heard. They were not allowed to them. So the trial was unfair, and the cover-up included covering it up from even the Australian government. I think this shows perhaps the politics that were behind the executions of Morant and Hancock. They needed a couple of sacrificial victims, did the British establishment, to pin the blame. I mean, it's an old trick. You put a couple of subordinates up and you throw the book at them and you refuse any question of clemency, when in fact they were acting either under orders or at least with the approval of their superiors. Scapegoats of a couple of colonials who didn't matter very much and were volunteers anyway. These men were convicted in the afternoon and they were hanged at dawn the next day, and that was done deliberately to prevent them from using the forms of appeal which existed to prevent the Australian government even knowing of this. That was an outrageous insult to Australia, which of course was federated the year before. An inquiry is an inquiry, and who knows, it can't be prejudged. Set up an inquiry and it may find that Hancock and Morant were guilty without any excuse. It may find that this is all camouflage, that they were really brutal men in a brutal war who behaved abominably and deserved at least the full sentence. Now, of course, it would not be execution, but they certainly deserved conviction. On the other hand, it could show that they were acting pursuant to a policy that was fairly general, adopted or accepted or acquiesced in by senior officers. And I think that would, of course, be interesting because it may show how this strain of illegality emerged in the British Army. It may, of course, serve some further purpose in South Africa. It may bring into focus what is seen now by many historians as a really unjustified colonial war. But all those things are interesting, but you can't expect that an inquiry, if it were set up, would exonerate Hancock and Morant. On any view, they deserve condemnation, but they certainly don't deserve, I would have thought,